What if the person who delivers the most devastating news of your life also offers you a path to absolute, undeniable retribution? Because that's exactly what happened to me one Tuesday morning. The aroma of freshly ground coffee usually soothed me, but that morning, the air in Blue Sparrow felt thick with an impending dread I couldn't quite place. I was just scrolling through my phone, waiting for my usual order, when this woman I'd never seen before slid into the chair across from me. It was like we were old friends meeting for brunch, but her eyes held a different kind of intensity. She wore an expensive-looking navy blazer and a crisp white blouse, the kind of outfit that screamed corporate executive. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect ponytail, and she carried a manila folder. She placed it on the table between us with such deliberate care, such chilling precision, that my stomach dropped even before she opened her mouth. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Your wife, Chloe, is cheating with my husband, David." My first thought, I swear to God, was that this had to be some kind of prank. Like I was on a hidden camera show, about to be laughed at. But then she opened that folder and began laying out photo after photo on the table. And suddenly, the air vanished from my lungs. My entire world tilted on its axis. There was Chloe, my wife of 4 years, holding hands with some guy in what looked like a fancy restaurant, kissing him outside a building I didn't recognize, walking into a condo, time-stamped for the middle of an afternoon when she'd told me she had back-to-back client meetings. The woman introduced herself as Victoria Wells, but told me to call her Vic. She had this calm, controlled energy that was more terrifying than if she'd been screaming or crying. Like she'd already processed her emotions and moved straight to strategic planning. She slid receipts across the table, hotel charges, restaurant bills, even security camera timestamps from a building called Colorado Condos. Every single piece of evidence lined up perfectly with days Chloe told me she was working late, meeting clients, or attending networking events. I need to back up for a second because just 12 hours before this coffee shop moment, I was lying in bed next to Chloe, convincing myself everything was fine. Or, at least, that's what I wanted to believe. We'd been going through what I thought was just a normal rough patch, you know, the kind where your spouse seems distracted, busy, maybe not as affectionate, but you chalk it up to work stress because that's easier than considering the terrifying alternatives. Chloe works in advertising at a big agency downtown. Demanding clients, crazy deadlines. Lately, she'd been staying late at the office at least 3 nights a week, sometimes coming home after I was already asleep. I'm a software developer with pretty regular 9 to 5 hours, so I'd gotten used to eating dinner alone, falling asleep to whatever show I was binge-watching, then waking up to find her already gone for an early meeting. There was always this tiny, insidious voice in the back of my head telling me something felt off. That she seemed happier texting on her phone than talking to me. But I pushed it down, deep, deep down, because acknowledging that gnawing doubt felt like shattering the very foundations of my life. Then, at 2:47 in the morning, I woke up to use the bathroom. And as I passed the nightstand, her phone lit up with a text notification. Normally, I would never look. I wouldn't. But something, some primal instinct, made me glance at the screen. And there it was, a message that said, "Can't wait to feel your hands on me again. You make me feel alive." B. My entire world just stopped. I stood there in the dark bathroom for probably 20 minutes, trying to convince myself there was some innocent explanation. Maybe it was a friend playing a joke. Maybe it was literally anything other than what I knew deep down it actually meant. I couldn't fall back asleep. I just lay there next to her, listening to her breathe peacefully, while my mind raced, replaying every interaction we'd had over the past few months. Suddenly, I was seeing all these signs I'd missed, or, more accurately, ignored. The next morning, after Chloe left for work, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through our credit card statements, our bank accounts, her calendar, anything I could access without her password. I created an Excel spreadsheet. I started cross-referencing dates and times, matching up the nights she said she was working late with charges at restaurants across town, hotel bookings on days she claimed to be at conferences, gaps in her location sharing that I'd previously explained away as in meetings. Every piece of data pointed to the same devastating conclusion. I felt like I was becoming this paranoid detective in my own marriage, but the evidence was overwhelming. That's when I got a text from an unknown number asking me to meet at Blue Sparrow coffee shop. It said it was urgent and about Chloe. And even though every true crime podcast I've ever listened to says, this is how people get murdered, I went anyway. Because I needed to know what the hell was happening. Which brings us back to Vic, sitting across from me, showing me proof that my wife had been having an affair with her husband, David, for what she estimated was at least 3 months based on her own evidence. Vic told me she'd hired a private investigator 4 weeks ago after finding suspicious charges on their shared credit card. That investigator had documented at least 15 separate meetings between Chloe and David, including regular visits to a condo that David apparently rented through his company, supposedly for visiting executives, but actually used for his affairs. Because, apparently, this wasn't his first time cheating. Vic had photos, video, GPS data, everything laid out in that folder like she was presenting evidence to a jury. She told me she found out my name by confronting David 2 days ago and demanding he tell her everything about this woman he'd been seeing. David, apparently, was some big-shot CEO at a tech company, married to Vic for 12 years, with 2 kids. According to what he finally admitted, he and Chloe met at some industry networking event. They started out as friends before it turned into something more. And now, they were supposedly in love, talking about leaving their spouses to be together. I was trying to process all of this, while my coffee got cold and the morning rush flowed around us. Vic just watched me with an expression that was equal parts sympathy and chilling determination. She slid one more thing across the table, a USB drive. And she said, I don't want chaos. I want justice. Let's work together on this. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a courtesy meeting to inform me about the affair. This was a recruitment pitch. She explained that she'd been planning her approach carefully. She didn't want to just confront them and have them deny everything or make excuses. No, she wanted to gather enough evidence that they couldn't talk their way out of it. Evidence that would have real, undeniable consequences for both of them, professionally and personally. The USB drive, she told me, contained software that could monitor computer activity, keystrokes, browsing history, everything I'd need to document exactly what Chloe had been doing behind my back. Vic leaned forward. David, she revealed, had been using company resources to facilitate this affair, booking the condo through his corporate account, using business dinners as cover for their meetings. She was already building a case to present to his board of directors. She asked if I knew whether Chloe had been doing anything similar, falsifying work hours or using client meetings as alibis. And suddenly, I was thinking about all those late nights she claimed to be at the office. All those weekend work sessions that seemed excessive, even for her demanding job. Vic slid a business card across the table with her personal cell number. Think about it, she said. But don't think too long. They're planning to meet tomorrow night. Then she was gone, leaving me sitting there with this folder of cold, hard evidence, this menacing USB drive, and the smoking remains of my marriage. I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, going through everything in the folder again, memorizing every photo, every receipt, every timestamp. A cold, hard clarity settled over me like ice water. When I finally left and drove home, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to install that software. I was going to gather every piece of evidence I could find. And I was going to make sure that when this all came crashing down, there was no way for Chloe to claim it was just a mistake or a moment of weakness. Because this wasn't a moment. This was hundreds of deliberate choices she made to betray me. And I was going to document every single one of them. That night, after Chloe came home from another supposed late meeting, acting completely normal, asking me about my day like she wasn't actively destroying our marriage, I waited. I waited until she fell asleep, and then I took that USB drive into my home office and installed the monitoring software on our shared desktop computer, the one Chloe used every morning to check her emails and work calendar. The software was incredibly sophisticated. It ran completely invisible in the background, capturing keystrokes, emails, chat messages, website visits. Everything. And within 48 hours, I had access to a level of detail about my wife's secret life that made me physically sick to look at. But I forced myself to read it all because I needed to know the full truth. The messages between Chloe and David were worse than I imagined. They weren't just hooking up, they were planning an entire future together. Talking about which one of them should file for divorce first. Discussing how they'd handle telling their families. Even looking at apartments they could rent together in downtown Denver once they were both free. There were messages where Chloe called me boring and said she felt trapped in our marriage. Messages where David talked about how his wife, Vic, was too focused on the kids and didn't understand him anymore. All the classic affair cliches that I always thought were stupid excuses people made, but apparently they're exactly what cheaters tell themselves to justify their actions. But here's where it got even worse. The software showed me that Chloe had been falsifying her work hours on a massive scale, billing clients for time she was actually spending with David, marking herself as in strategy meetings when the GPS data showed she was at Colorado condos, essentially committing timesheet fraud that could get her fired and potentially lose her professional license if her agency ever found out. I texted Vic and told her what I found. She asked me to meet her again, this time at a bar on the opposite side of town from where either of us lived. When I got there, she already had a bourbon waiting for me, which, honestly, I needed after the week I'd had. She told me she'd been doing her own digging into David's finances and had discovered that he'd been using company funds to pay for the condo rental, expensing dinners with Chloe as business development meetings. Basically using his position as CEO to fund his affair with corporate money, which was not just unethical, but potentially illegal depending on how the company's board wanted to handle it. Vic had compiled everything into a detailed report with bank statements, credit card receipts, calendar entries. She was planning to present it to the board of directors at a special meeting she was demanding they hold. And she wanted to know if I was willing to do something similar with the evidence against Chloe, by reporting her timesheet fraud to her agency's ethics committee. I sat there, swirling my bourbon, thinking about how 3 weeks ago my biggest worry was whether we needed to refinance our mortgage. And now I was planning to potentially destroy my wife's entire career. But then I thought about all those messages where she called me boring and talked about how much happier she was with David. And suddenly, I didn't feel conflicted anymore. I felt crystal clear about what needed to happen. Vic started talking about something she called Operation Consequences, which sounded dramatic, but was basically just a coordinated plan to expose both David and Chloe at the same time, in a way that maximized the professional and personal fallout for both of them, hitting them when they were most vulnerable and least expecting it. The plan was this: we wait until their next scheduled meetup at Colorado condos, which, according to their messages, was happening in 3 days. Vic would submit her report to David's board that morning, triggering an emergency executive session. I would file a formal complaint with Chloe's agency ethics committee with all the timesheet evidence. And then, while they thought they were safe in their little love nest, we'd both show up and confront them with the fact that their entire lives were currently imploding. It sounded insane when she laid it out like that, but there was something about the precision of it, the way she thought through every detail and contingency, that made me feel like maybe this was exactly what needed to happen. Not out of revenge, not entirely, but out of a desperate need for accountability. For them to face real consequences for their choices instead of just getting to walk away and start over like nothing happened. Vic showed me text messages where David had been love-bombing her, suddenly attentive, affectionate, buying her flowers. She realized it was guilt behavior because he knew he was about to leave her and was trying to ease his own conscience by being temporarily nice. And it made me think about how Chloe had suggested last week that we should book a weekend trip together. Probably doing the exact same thing, trying to assuage her guilt with performative gestures of affection. We spent the next 3 days in constant communication, Vic and I, texting back and forth, finalizing every detail of the plan. And somewhere in all of this, I realized she'd become the only person I could actually talk to about what I was going through. Because she was the only one who truly understood. She was living the exact same nightmare from the exact same betrayal. The night before D-Day, Chloe told me she had an important client dinner, that would run late, and she probably wouldn't be home until after midnight. I just nodded and said, "That's fine. Go ahead. Have fun." And she kissed me on the cheek, like Judas kissing Jesus, and headed out the door without a clue about what was coming. I texted Vic. She just left. "Are you ready?" And she responded, "Board meeting. Starts at 9 a.m. Ethics complaint filed. I'll meet you at the condo at 8 p.m. And I felt this strange calm wash over me. The moment before a storm breaks. I showed up at Colorado Condos at 7:45, 15 minutes early, and sat in my car in the parking garage, watching the entrance, thinking about how many times Chloe had walked through those doors, thinking she was getting away with everything, thinking I was too trusting or too stupid to ever figure it out. At exactly 8 p.m., I saw David's car pull in. Expensive black Mercedes, screaming, "Tech CEO." I watched him park and head toward the elevator, and I gave him 5 minutes to get settled before I followed. I took the elevator to the 4th floor, found unit 412, which I knew from the security footage timestamps. I just stood outside the door for a minute, listening to music playing inside, wondering if I was really about to do this. And then I thought about that text message that started all of this. "Can't wait to feel your hands on me again." And I knocked on the door. I heard movement inside. Voices. Then footsteps approaching. And the door opened. There was Chloe, in this elegant black dress I'd never seen before, her hair done up fancy, a smile on her face that immediately died when she saw it was me standing there instead of David. For a split second, I saw pure panic flash across her face before she tried to recover, tried to act confused. "Cole, what are you doing here?" "I'm at a client dinner." Even though we both knew that lie just evaporated the moment she opened the door dressed like that. I walked past her into the condo without waiting for an invitation. And there was David, standing in the living room with 2 glasses of wine, wearing an expensive suit with the tie loosened. The look on his face when he saw me was almost worth all the pain of the past few weeks. Pure deer-in-headlights terror, mixed with the dawning realization that his entire carefully constructed secret life had just collapsed in an instant. I pulled out the folder I'd been carrying. The same kind of manila folder Vic had showed me 3 weeks ago, except this one was mine. Filled with printed screenshots of every message, every falsified timesheet, every lie Chloe had told over the past 3 months. I dropped it on the coffee table between us with a heavy thud that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Chloe tried to speak. "Cole, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like," but I cut her off. I just started listing facts. The dates. The times. The hotels. The restaurants. The messages where she called our marriage boring. The timesheet entries where she billed clients for hours she spent in this exact condo. I watched her face go from panic to resignation as she realized there was no way to talk her way out of this, because I had everything documented. David finally found his voice and asked how I found out. I told him about Vic, the private investigator, the monitoring software, Operation Consequences. And then I delivered the real bombshell. That at 9 o'clock this morning, his board of directors received a comprehensive report detailing his use of company funds to facilitate this affair. And that Chloe's ethics committee had been reviewing her falsified timesheets since yesterday afternoon. The color drained from both their faces. They realized this wasn't just their marriage's ending. This was their entire careers potentially being destroyed. Chloe actually stumbled backward and sat down on the couch like her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. David started getting angry, asking what right I had to ruin his life. And I just laughed. Because the audacity of that question was almost impressive. Like somehow I was the villain in this story for exposing what they did, rather than them being the villains for doing it in the first place. I told them both that they made hundreds of conscious choices to betray their spouses, to lie, to steal from their employers, to build this relationship on a foundation of deception. And now they were facing the natural consequences. Consequences that Vic and I didn't create. We just made sure they couldn't be avoided or explained away. Chloe started crying, asking me if I was really going to let her lose everything over a mistake. And I told her this wasn't a mistake. This was 3 months of deliberate decisions. This was you planning a future with him while lying to my face every single day. And even as I said it, I was surprised by how calm I sounded. Like all the emotion had been burned out of me. And what was left was just this cold, sharp clarity. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Vic saying, "Divorce papers filed." I'm done. I showed the message to David and told him his wife was officially leaving him. Then I looked at Chloe and told her I wanted her moved out of our apartment by the end of the week. That I'd already contacted a divorce attorney. That I was keeping the apartment and she could figure out her own living situation, preferably far away from me. David tried to say something about how they didn't mean for it to happen like this, how they really do love each other. And I cut him off. Then I guess you got what you wanted. You can be together now. You're both single and unemployed. Congratulations. The sarcasm in my voice was sharp enough to cut glass. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and dividing up belongings. Chloe moved in with a friend from work, and we barely spoke except through our attorneys. I found out through the legal discovery process that her agency did, in fact, terminate her employment after the ethics investigation confirmed the timesheet fraud. And she's currently facing a hearing that could result in losing her professional advertising license permanently. David's situation was even worse. His board didn't just fire him, they're pursuing criminal charges for embezzlement and corporate fraud. And according to Vic, who I'm still in regular contact with, he's looking at potentially serious legal consequences that could include jail time, depending on how aggressive the DA wants to be. Part of me wondered if Vic and I went too far. If we let our hurt and anger push us into destroying two people's lives more thoroughly than necessary. But then I remembered all those messages where they talked about us like we were just obstacles to overcome. Where they laughed about how clueless we were. Where they planned their future together without any apparent guilt about the families they were destroying. And I stopped feeling conflicted. Vic tells me that David tried to reach out to her, asking if she'd be willing to testify on his behalf at his hearing, help paint him as a good person who made a mistake. She just laughed and blocked his number. Because the audacity of that request, after everything he put her through, is genuinely unbelievable. About 3 months after the confrontation at the condo, Vic asked me if I wanted to meet up for coffee. Not to talk about our exes or the legal proceedings, but just to talk like normal people. And I realized that over the course of this nightmare, she'd become one of the only people I felt comfortable being completely honest with, because she understood exactly what I went through. We met at a different cafe this time, nowhere near Blue Sparrow, because that place has too many memories now. And we ended up talking for 3 hours about everything except David and Chloe. About our jobs and our families and what we wanted for our futures. And when we finally left, I realized I was smiling for the first time in months. And it felt genuine rather than forced. We started meeting regularly after that, once a week at first, and then more frequently. And it's nice to have someone who doesn't treat me like I'm broken or damaged. Someone who gets that I'm processing a major betrayal, but doesn't define me entirely by it. Around 6 months after everything exploded, David took a plea deal that included 2 years of probation, community service, and repaying the company for all the funds he misappropriated. His reputation in the tech industry is completely destroyed. And last I heard, he's working at some retail job, trying to pay his legal fees. Chloe lost her license after the ethics hearing, couldn't find work in advertising anymore, and ended up moving back to her hometown in Oregon to stay with her parents while she figures out what to do next. Honestly, I don't feel much of anything about it anymore. Not satisfaction or anger or sadness. Just a kind of neutral acceptance that this is how things played out. Vic and I have been officially dating for about 2 months now. And I know some people might think it's weird that we got together after everything that happened, but it actually makes perfect sense to us. Because we built our relationship on complete honesty from day one. There are no secrets between us, no hidden phones or mysterious late nights. Just 2 people who learned the hard way what betrayal looks like and decided to build something different. We're taking it slow. We're both still processing our divorces, and neither of us is in a rush to jump into anything too serious too fast. But it feels healthy and stable in a way my marriage to Chloe never really did, even before I knew about David. Someone on a forum asked me recently if I thought what Vic and I did was revenge or justice. And honestly, I think it was just truth. We didn't fabricate anything or exaggerate anything. We just exposed the reality of what David and Chloe had done to their employers, families, and the legal system. And those institutions decided on their own what the consequences should be. Looking back now, I don't regret any of it. Not the investigation, not operation consequences, not even the dramatic confrontation at the condo. Because the alternative would have been living in ignorance while my wife planned her exit strategy. And at least this way, I got to control my own narrative rather than being blindsided when she finally decided to leave. So yeah, that's my story. Make of it what you will. And if you're listening to this wondering if you should trust that gut feeling that something's wrong in your relationship, trust it. Because that feeling exists for a reason. And ignoring it doesn't make the problem go away. It just means you find out later, when the damage is worse. What do you think about this wild ride? If you were in my shoes, would you have done the same? Or would you have taken a different path? Let me know in the comments below. I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts.